Good morning, everyone. Kris here with Inspired Energy, joining me, Hartwell. Good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Kris. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, so we're looking at another continuation here. We were talking about the Ring of Alchemy, and we had discussed gates 6 and 40. And this week we're doing 47 and 64, but maybe you can recap for those who were not here last week, the 6 and 40.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the six, we talked about the shadow of conflict, which can lead us towards peace via the way of diplomacy. So, and with and with the 40, we saw that the journey in the shadow begins with exhaustion and leads us toward divine will by way of resolve. What these two things seem to have in common as part of this codon ring is the idea of the physical transformation of the human species.
Mm-hmm.
There's um, there's all sorts of mythologies and around this, and also, of course, it's become very topical conversation. In recent decades with the New Age, the idea of the transformation of our genetics as well, and it
Mm-hmm.
feels like there's a connection there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that in order for people to evolve, you have to start changing, right? On a physical level, I think,
Yes.
anyways. Otherwise, things stay the same.
Well, our body is our vehicle for our consciousness, so it makes
Hmm.
sense that it would not get left behind
Hmm.
at some
Exactly.
level.
So let's dive in here and let's talk about gate 47. What can you tell us about gate 47?
Well, gate 47, which is up in the ajna, pointing towards the head, is about the journey from oppression to transfiguration via the way of transmutation. Big words here today.
Hmm.
Um, and, like the others, its amino acid is glycine, and the neocortex is where this is all taking place. But when we look at the shadow of oppression, what we're looking at is the storehouse of human karma. And that karma, you know, sometimes we talk about it being stored somewhere else, like in the Akashic records. But another way to look at it is that it's stored right here in the genetics of our human body. So that oppression arises up and through our own genetic inheritance.
Hmm.
And part of how that operates is through what geneticists call the non-coding or junk DNA. Geneticists can't figure out what it's for.
Hmm.
And here we're suggesting that it might, on some level, be the turbine of human evolution. It might, on some level, drive us,
Right.
just as our oppression, just as our karma drives us on some level towards our eventual release from karma.
Mm-hmm.
So here, it's not the coding of that kind of oppression in us is it's at a deep level, it's at an archetypal level, at the level of our totems, perhaps. um, these fear patterns that cause us to be oppressed, um, they're best accessed through things like archetypal work, totem work.
Hmm.
And if we actually have the courage to do totem work and this deep archetypal work, this is what gives us some leverage on our own fears.
Hmm.
And when we face our fears through exploring those things, then we bring about a transmutation. Transmutation being one thing turning into another. Um, Grail that we seek lies behind our fears, as Richard Rudd would say. If
Hmm.
you do not look your adversity square in the face and realize that it is the very manifestation of your own archetype, you miss the whole point and purpose of your life. Your suffering is a magic mirror. It's yours to own, to appreciate, and to accept. Only when you finally stop trying to avoid it can it show you its magic. So again and again, Rudd brings us back to this idea that our shadows are not something to jettison, like we take out the garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Our particular
Mm-hmm.
issues, our particular fears are part of the mythology that will one day unfold to the end of the story, which is the part that we always want to get to, right? I want to get to the good
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Right.
But those fears are the seeds of our good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
And what?
why, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, what's at the end of the rainbow? Like once you get there, once you get through the transmutation, what's on the other side?
Well, at the end of the rainbow is transfiguration,
Mm-hmm.
which is best symbolized, or that word again. It's transmutation, transfiguration. How do I sort them out? But the best example of transfiguration would be the resurrection of Christ. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that is the best example when he is, and subsequently after his resurrection, his return return to being with God.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably before alchemy came along and before genetic quantum mechanics came along. That was probably the only word, the only image that we had to express transfiguration.
Right. And now
But
everybody calls it ascension or your light body or
yeah, now we seem to have a couple different things emerging cross culturally. People talk about the rainbow body.
mm-hmm.
They talk about the transfiguration of the physical human body into something finer. We
Mm-hmm.
have the idea of the mystical union, the sacred marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, for new age people, when people who talk about 5D and all these kind of things, they talk about ascension.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what it's pointing to.
It's just different terms for the same process, basically.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
correct. So the idea here is that we get to that place by embracing everything in our journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that provides the fuel for it shifting and transmuting and then transfiguring. Very
Mm-hmm.
alchemical. You can hear the this is why it's called the Ring of Alchemy, because there's these words that suggest that process
Mm-hmm.
of one thing turning into another. Now you have the 47. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Um, I would say that the shadow side I could relate to in trying to accomplish anything and always feeling like there was an obstacle or something in the way. And then you give up and you start over again. And then pretty soon it feels like it says here hopeless. Like you think, oh God, there's not another way. But I mean, when then you have to consider other parts of your design when you're in that. So, another part of my design I know is to surrender. So it's like, okay, well, I'm in this spot and, you know,
Mhm.
I just have to wait and see what happens. Um, but I can see the deeper layers of, facing your shadows. And I can think of different times where, facing fears never turned out to be as bad as you thought they were. And then there was always something better on the other side, kind
Yeah.
of thing. Not necessarily at the city level, but just that it, the resolution of facing the fear became not scary, right? So then something good comes out of it, right?
Yeah, and there's
Mhm.
a release or a lightning from
Mhm.
that.
Right.
Um, Actually, lightning is the lightning of something is actually an image that applies to the 64th gene key,
Mm-hmm.
which we haven't seen this very much in our exploration, but the the other gate that makes up a channel with the 47 is the 64. So these two that we're looking at back to back today form one single channel in human design. And that's a channel that goes between the head and the head and the ajna. So
Mm-hmm.
64 is the journey from confusion to illumination via the way of imagination. And we see here an energy that resides in the pineal gland. But the 64 is intrinsically related to this idea of light,
Mm-hmm.
the inner light, which is obscured by confusion. And so confusion is a driver. But I mean, the word confusion, which comes from the Latin confusa, is about the chaos of the elements. And in that chaos, there's an incredible potentiality in that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the level of the shadow, that confusion causes suffering for us, and that suffering is rooted in our past. It's like this blanket of confusion that lies over everything,
Mm-hmm.
and it creates this feedback loop between I'm confused, therefore I doubt myself. Oh, I'm doubtful, therefore I get confused. So the
Mm-hmm.
63, which we've seen before, is also in the head, and its shadow is doubt. So there's this confusion, there's this biofeedback loop between confusion and doubt and confusion.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't know how to escape that confusion, what we do is we tend to imitate things. No, we look outward at the world and we say, oh, I'm feeling confused. So I'm going to imitate somebody who seems not to be confused.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to grab onto a belief system. I'm going to grab onto a philosopher or thinker out there who seems to be clear about things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we grab on and we imitate others.
Mm-hmm. We put a
In
mask
order,
on.
pardon?
We put a mask on, and
Yeah, yeah. All because we're trying to escape from this sense of oppression and confusion.
mm-hmm.
Um, and then we live lives that are very dull.
Mm-hmm.
But when we, when we start to be willing to face our fear and the confusion and to look at it, um, then we probably have, and I think we've all had this experience, as soon as you stop thinking,
Mm-hmm.
the fear and the confusion and the doubt go away.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
You go for a good workout, you plunge yourself into, some sort of activity, or maybe you read a good book, and it's like that doubt and confusion go away because you're no longer listening to your mind. And
Yeah.
so
Oh, I was going to say this kind of reminds me of what our mentor was talking about, how everybody has a different method for slipping into that connection with the divine mind. For some people, you physically exhaust yourself, and then, the insights and the intuition have space to drop in because the mind is not as busy, right? It's
yeah.
been exhausted. Hmm.
So, I mean, this is a really, what am I trying to say? It's kind of like, wow, the mind really sucks if you think about it. It's like
Yeah.
I can't think of anything more sort of
Well,
learned to sound like it just sucks.
yeah, it throws us off course.
Yeah.
It's like the nemesis. Mhm.
But once we stop believing everything our mind tells us, then so much energy is liberated. And then
Mhm.
our own unique imagination is released. And that can fuel an incredible artistic process in us, an alchemical transformation where it's like, wow, I freed up a little energy. I got a little space from my internal mental dialogue, and now I feel freed.
Mhm.
My mind feels. It's paradoxical. It's like, okay, stop thinking, and then the mind can become freer.
Mhm.
And we can soar on the wings of our heart. The mind abstract and illogical and wild.
Mhm.
And there can be, at that gift level of imagination, a sense of liberation, a sense of, oh my God. But at the highest level of the city, it becomes illumination.
Mhm.
And, this brings to mind the idea of Zen koans, paradoxical statements that exhaust the mind. And in the exhaustion of the mind, we can often have that breakthrough into that space beyond mind.
Mhm. The void, the
Yes.
ether. Yeah.
The Satori, whatever you want to call it. There's so many things to call it.
Mhm.
And this reveals that this path, the 4764, is the path of Tantra, the path of surrender,
Mhm.
where we surrender the mind to listen to the heart.
Mhm.
Whereas the other side of the the other channel at the other side of the head ajna is the path of yoga, the path of the logic. The path of logic is the same as the path of yoga.
Mhm.
So this is the other side, the path of tantra, which is all about surrender.
So you have this gate 64. What's your experience with it?
Well, I have plenty of experience of confusion and wandering around in the fog of my own mind, but I also have a real love of imagination.
Mhm.
Ever since I was a kid, I loved to read fairy tales and fantasy fiction and think about magic. And I know, there are times when an imaginative spark goes off in my mind and it just feels so incredibly liberating.
Mhm.
It's like my whole reality shifts in those
Mhm.
moments.
Mhm.
And there's that sense of release from the confusion into a space of, hmm, I don't know, a space of,
Just
it feels
knowing
very
and being,
knowing, did you say?
knowing and being, just being like.
Yeah, and it feels quite, in some ways, it feels quite intoxicating. It feels
Mhm.
like, makes me think of my dragonfly totem.
Mhm.
That sense of traveling between worlds on the wings of your imagination.
Mhm.
It's very it's quite wonderful. So
Mhm.
I do have a strong feeling for imagination and
Mhm.
illumination. I
So,
do.
so do you have a way to sum up these two gates?
Um, well, I mean, I like what we've seen before. I like what we get to here with these. As the Ring of Alchemy is this holds a pivotal role in the transformation of the human species, and so we see the words diplomacy and resolve and transmutation and imagination rising up here, and in diplomacy, for instance, the gate six, as we saw, there's a transformation of the way we relate to each other. With resolve and the 40, there's a transformation of us. I don't know. I get the image of it straightens our spine and makes us aware that we can, I don't know. The image that's coming to me right now in this moment is step onto the stage with God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, God created the stage, God created everything, but it's like standing up in front of God and saying, I'm not ashamed.
Here I am.
Here I am. Because I think God doesn't want us to stand in front of him with a sense of shame. He says, I created you as a magnificent being. So show up.
Yeah, he created us to show his glory. What he
Right.
created. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the 40, which is all about resolve and divine will, I think is about showing up and looking God in the eyes, so to speak. And I'm not seeking to be arrogant here. I'm just saying, showing up in front of God and saying, I want to live with my shoulders back, and I want to be in your presence in a way where I'm not acting ashamed. And then
Or
we have the 47,
mm-hmm.
which is all about overcoming the oppression of the mind and overcoming the oppression from our own karma. And when we have the 47, it's like freeing up our mind from the veil of confusion. So it's hard to explain the feeling behind it, but there's definitely that sense.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that conveys some of it.
Mm-hmm. Dragon just said, I am that I am. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So how would you wrap up, or do you want to mention what we're doing next week? Do we have a next week?
Yeah, we do. Next week we
Mm-hmm.
start with what's called the Ring of Matter. Gate
Mm-hmm.
18, gate 46, 48, and 57.
Yeah, it sounds like about taking things from the spiritual and landing them in the physical when we talk about the ring of matter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's intriguing what that brings up.
So with that, we're going to sign off and join us next Wednesday at 9 a.m. If anybody wants to dive deeper into their charts, they can contact us here at Clair-i-tea at 587-596-3333, and Hartwell will be happy to dive into your chart with you. So have a beautiful day and God bless.